YouTube? There we go.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
We're live. Okay, great. All right. Well then, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Wednesday, July 28th Charter Review Committee. Mr. Wilson, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here and I was muted. I will be stepping out at 6. Melissa will take over then.
Okay. Are you good to call the roll?
Yes. Give me let's see, I need a split screen here. Yes, Ramsey Stevens.
Present.
Barbara White. No.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm here, Barbara White.
Make that a yes. Wes Blackman.
Here.
Joyce Brown.
Here.
Jerry Leanne Flaherty.
Here.
Anthony Gallegos.
Present.
Sam Goodstein.
Here.
Daniel Morgan.
Here.
Deborah Robert.
Here.
Zaid Shamshi Basha. Zaid here. And myself. And we also have Melissa Coyle as our attorney here, city attorney. Okay, I think I have the roll.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. White, would you do us the honors and lead us in the pledge?
Could I pass on that?
Okay, sure.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Morgan, would you do us the honors and lead us in the pledge?
I most definitely will do that. I just fortunately don't have a flag, but I will face the west, I suppose. Okay. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the July 6th and July 12th minutes?
motion to approve.
So moved.
Who was that?
Second.
Sorry, who did those? Approve it, motion and second? Who was that made the motion and second?
I motion.
I did.
motion.
I'm sorry, could you say your name? I don't have everybody's picture up there.
Yeah, Wes Blackman. I either made the motion and seconded it.
Okay, did somebody else second it?
Who came, but
Second.
it was a tie.
All right, so I'll put down Deborah as the second. I'm just not sure who's talking.
Okay. And all those in favor? Say aye. Aye.
I
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, with that, we get to jump into it. So everyone, if you aren't aware, the City Commission is actually discussing election-related issues at their August 17th meeting. In order for us to be on the agenda for that meeting, we need to actually come to a decision on those items that we'd like before them tonight, because anything that goes on that agenda actually has to be done before Friday. So that's my context for this evening's meeting. I really want to encourage everyone to make motions as much as possible tonight. It would be great if we could actually vote on some things and get some action items in front of the commission prior to that meeting. I think there is broad consensus amongst us on at least, a couple items, if not even all of these items. And I think there's probably relatively small steps that we could take to get to consensus through reasonable compromise on, several of these larger items tonight. So yet again, I encourage people to be ambitious in their motion making tonight. Let's try and actually get something in front of them for Friday. Beyond that, I know that we have a number of reports due, most notably from the city clerk, who I know had some discussions with the supervisor of elections. What I'd like to do is, Madam Clerk, if you're good, can you tell us about your discussions with the supervisor of elections and anyone else? And then Mr. Morgan, can you report back on your assignments? And then Mr. Blackman, you do the same. And then I also looked into ranked choice voting and spoke with the supervisor of elections. So then I can go. And anyone else who did any homework, let's then discuss the homework and then jump into actually public comment. We have public comment, and then we'll try and get into the meat of it. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
All right. Then, Madam Clerk, it's your show.
Okay, so good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So yes, I spoke to the supervisor of elections, and she will be, Wendy Sartori Link is the current Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections. She will be coming to the August 17th meeting to give a presentation to the commission. So I suggested to Chair Stevens that he speak on behalf of the committee if there are any questions or whatever. So one thing is, there's been a lot of discussion about moving the election from March to November. That's not possible right now. First of all, because the terms are 3 years, that would mean that we would have, so we had an election this year, we have an election next year. 2023 is an off year. So they need time in the off years because they have elections primarily during even years in November. They need the time in the off years to get ready for the other years. They said absolutely positively we could not have elections in November. So that discussion is off the table. The supervisor will certainly address that at the meeting. The other thing I asked about was ranked choice voting. And it's interesting because I saw Chair Stevens, you forwarded me the email from Ashley Houlihan, who is the counsel for the supervisor of elections office. I had actually spoken with her and her response was a little different, whereas now she said can't be done because of Florida law. So what she said to me previously is kind of moot. And I think that's it. I can address what Commissioner McVoy said. And as someone who has run the last 6 elections all on my own for the city, I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. I can answer a lot of questions. And there are some things that I would like to see change that would be beneficial, I believe, to the city. But that's all I have regarding the report right now.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Morgan.
You're muted.
Mr. Morgan, you're still muted.
Here, I almost finished my spiel. Sorry. So when I reached out to the supervisor elections office, I did with their info at vote Palm Beach, Gov, something like that. I sent multiple emails. I didn't get anything back. I called and I heard that and we're still very busy. So I didn't get a direct answer regard to moving the potential, the policy change of March elections to November. I didn't get an answer from the supervisor of elections office for that, and I didn't get an answer for ranked choice voting. But what the receptionist did tell me was that the city, Lake Worth Beach, had received information, which we just heard the city clerk right now discussing. I'm assuming what the city clerk just said is what the people at the supervisor of elections office would say to us. And so, yes, in regards to my task, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And Mr. Blackman.
Yeah, I was assigned a couple different items. I want to thank Melissa, the city clerk, for helping me. Just this afternoon, we distributed something that she put together, which was historical voter turnout information for elections since 2007 in the city of Lake Worth Beach, parentheses. And that is interest. You can see the lopsided nature, and I think it's a moot point now in terms of November, since we're getting a pretty definitive answer and direction from the Supervisor of Elections Office regarding the possibility of November elections. There are 39 municipalities in Palm Beach County, and all currently have the March election cycle. And I feel strongly in favor of staying with that, having experienced the November election cycle in the city of Lake Worth Beach. Well, we do have that information that was distributed this afternoon. I did additional research and talked to someone who is involved in the city of Boynton Beach and is very active there. They are the only city that has a single member commissioner representation. They have 4 commission seats, and they are roughly proportional, and they are revised every 10 years. We can look at their charter. We can look at what is on Municode to find more information, but I didn't have time to do that. But the only at-large seat is the mayor there. I did not plumb the depths and ask if they have runoff elections and that sort of thing. Some homework, and I would hesitate to throw a lot out there for the August 17th meeting. I would be interested more in listening what the commission has to say to give us direction, because I think right now it might be a little too early for us to really, stake our claim on any one direction. So I would just caution that. I did not get a good answer about why West Palm Beach did away with their proportional elections, other than there was a lot of work in determining the proportionality, which is important if we go down that route. So that's what I've found out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Blackman. Okay, so I also did some homework on these issues. I did speak with the counsel for the Supervisor of Elections, and she was adamant that November is not an option, that no one else does it. They frankly won't let us do it. If we tried to force the issue, they would make it cost prohibitive, because we would have to pay for our own paper, I guess, because the ballot in November is already very long. That was really the other issue she was, very key on with me, was that the November ballot tends to have state constitutional questions and then, of course, federal elections and state elections. So if you add municipal elections to it, you get this incredibly long ballot, and if they have to do that for one municipality, they're just not into it. But what I think we should do, if there is a majority for this, and ideally consensus, I think that we should at least encourage the commission to ask the the Palm Beach County League of Cities to work on this. Because I do think if this was facilitated at the county level, right, instead of us just trying to be one commission going against the supervisor, or one city going against the Supervisor of Elections, one city bearing the cost of this, if we were able to say, hey, look, we think this is important, and ask the League of Cities here in the county to work on it, I think that keeps this conversation going and makes it a possibility at some point. But I definitely, from my discussions with them, do not think that we should be trying to take this on ourselves. I also spoke to them about ranked choice voting, and they said same thing, no dice, we're not doing it. I also took it on myself to speak to the principal advocacy group here in the state of Florida for ranked choice voting. They, of course, have a different opinion. They think that constitutionally it's totally doable, that there's no law stopping it. And they actually are in the process of litigating over this on behalf of the city of Sarasota. So Sarasota actually did adopt ranked choice voting and is litigating over it. I'm going to say the same thing here about the November election. I think that if there is a majority on this committee who thinks that this is something that would be worthwhile at some point in the future, we can put it on the commission to do the same thing, reach out to the league, voice support for it. Also, they could even do an ordinance for ranked choice voting saying, hey, we support this, and become a plaintiff, no cost. But I believe if we wanted to, we could become a plaintiff for ranked choice voting. Yet again, though, I don't think any of that is really worthy of substantive discussion, though, and really should be tabled by this committee. Those are just kind of asides that we can put in front of the commission and say, hey, these are issues that are important to our democracy in this city. If you all want to do the resolution work or the ordinance work to keep these conversations going, we support you. But that, of course, is contingent on there being a majority on this committee to take that approach.
Chair Stevens?
Yes.
So regarding the November elections, the one thing is to consider, unless we change our terms for the commission, that would not be possible right now. The other thing is, as you did say, the ballot is very long, and I understand that we want to get as many people out to vote as possible. I would love 100% turnout. We don't even have 100% registered in the city. Out of 38,000 residents, I think 17,000 are registered. That's not even half. But bearing in mind that when you have a really long ballot, by the time you get to the municipal section, should there be one, people may lose interest. People will turn out for the presidential year, but not any other year, because we have tried moving the election and it hasn't really made a big difference. What I think needs to be done, certainly not by the committee, is that people need to realize municipal elections are really important, and there was a bigger turnout the last time. The other thing regarding ranked choice voting, what Ashley said to me first is she thinks it could be done, but it would require recalibrating the machines, because if we went to that and we were the only city that had ranked choice voting, our election could not be the same day as the other municipalities. We would therefore have to have a standalone election. And just so you know, elections cost approximately $40,000+. And we would have to, rather than sharing it amongst the municipalities, sharing the cost, we would have to pay a higher amount than that, maybe $60,000 to have a standalone election. And because we're not the richest city in the county, that's something, which is why I'd like to get rid of runoffs too, because it's very expensive. That's all I have to say about that.
Madam Clerk, I think that's a good segue for now. Can we hear more about what you would actually like to see, and then we'll go into public comment?
Certainly, I would say the biggest thing is getting rid of the runoffs. It's a colossal waste of resources. And I have done investigation because I would love to be able to say that every time there's a runoff, the person who was in first place during the general election wins, because then obviously you have a great leg to stand on. Unfortunately, most of the time they win, they don't always win. So also it's 2 weeks apart. So everything that it's taken me 6 months to prepare for, I now have to do within 2 weeks. There's a lower turnout, but primarily it is a huge, huge waste of money. There's so much we could do with $40,000. So getting rid of the runoff is one thing. I know you discussed during qualifications. Right now in the charter, you only have to be a resident for 6 months before you can run for office. Something to think about is, do you think 6 months is long enough? Would you want to change it to maybe a year? I don't know. But somebody did bring up a point about, I'm going to just say this is theoretical, okay? So you have to be a resident of the district for at least 6 months before qualifying, not before the election, before qualifying, which, by the way, we are changing our qualifying dates because they don't fall in line with the deadline from the SOE's office. So say that you live in District 2, and because of our elections, the elections for District 1 and 3 that year. So you change your license 6 months before qualifying and you run for District 1. And then 3 years later, you use your other license. And then 3 years later, I'm not saying this has happened, although it has, but just something to think about, that is somebody actually living in the district. Now, there's nothing, we're the qualifying officers. I'm the qualifying officer. It's not my job to send a detective to a house to see if somebody's actually living there. I've been told that the person may not be living there. It's up to someone else to make the complaint, not for the city clerk. And then the last thing is we're supposed to have a meeting like 2 days after we get the results. And that time frame is just way too short to arrange a meeting and get everything done. And I think that should be changed in the charter as well. The amount of time, like obviously it shouldn't be 2 months, but like maybe change it to as quickly as can be arranged or something, without an actual stipulation of time. Because every year we go through that, we're supposed to have a meeting and then we don't get the results till Friday. So we have to change it to Monday. And it's been a pain for the 5 years I've been here. So those are the things I'd like to see addressed.
Well, Madam Clerk, I think we can definitely tackle those. With that, though, can we jump into the public comment? So do you want to go first?
You're chairing the meeting. It's at your pleasure.
Okay. Yeah, I think you only have Mr. McVoy's or Commissioner McVoy's. Sorry.
Yes, I have Commissioner McVoy's. I also had Ryan Oblander's, but I guess you have that. And I have whatever, and my page seems messed up, and I have the thing from Ashley, but you spoke about that. So if you want me to read Commissioner McVoy's, I'd be happy to.
That would be appreciated, and then I'll take the other three.
Okay, so this is very bizarre. Why don't you go first, because my whole paper is like messed up. I have to reopen it.
All right.
I apologize.
No worries. All right. So everyone bear with me. I've got a little reading to do here. The first is a public comment that I received from a Mr. Winnikoff, who lives, well, let me just jump into it. Dear Commissioners, I commend the city's efforts in forming the Charter Review Advisory Committee. I understand that the committee will be discussing and advising the commission our election processes, including per district or at large voting. I also understand that there is a movement toward per district voting. I write to you as an individual, but I also am the vice president of the Pineapple Village North Homeowners Association. We are a 16-unit townhome association. I believe at-large voting will benefit our association and the city by helping keep candidates and elected officials more focused on citywide issues, ensuring the overall public interest rather than narrow interests as they are served. Yet, if the committee and commission do decide to move toward per district voting, I recommend more at-large commissioners be added to balance the interests between the districts and the city at large. Thank you for your consideration, Sam Winnikoff. And then he provides his address, which I will note is off South Federal Highway. Okay. And we have another public comment from State Representative Omari Hardy. He says, hi, Melissa. I would like to submit the following public comment. He says, please recommend charter changes that will make the city commission more representative of the city's residents. In particular, please consider, number one, moving municipal elections from March to November, when voter turnout among all demographic groups is highest, and when the proportion of Black and brown voters in the electorate is the highest as well. Number two, extending the mayor's and commissioners' terms to 4-year terms, so as to avoid holding municipal elections in odd years when nothing else is on the ballot. Number three, term limiting commissioners and the mayor to 2 4-year terms, which is a total of 8 years. Number four, electing 4 commissioners to single-member districts. That is, districts whose commissioners are chosen only by the voters within their respective districts. Number five, adding 2 seats to the commission that will be elected at large. That is, in citywide elections. The last American Community Survey showed that 60% of the city's residents are non-white, yet 100% of the city's elected officials are white. That is a travesty in and of itself, but it is also the symptom of a deeper problem, a problem with how and when the city's elections are conducted. If the city implements the above mentioned reforms, voter participation in municipal elections will increase. The municipal electorate will become more diverse, and the dais will look and think more like the average city resident. These are good things. No? Thanks, Representative Omari Hardy. Okay, and then lastly, from Ryan Oblander, he writes, "Thank you, Charter Review Board members, for doing what you do. I believe that the people of the city of Lake Worth Beach would benefit from an expansion of the commission to include 2 at-large seats. This hybrid approach allows for a more diverse dais and gives the people greater access to their elected officials while also helping with instances where certain electeds are either absent or recused from the discussions. Thank you." Okay, with that, Madam Clerk.
Okay. So this is from Commissioner McVoy. Dear members of the Lake Worth Beach Charter Review Committee, I was asked to share my thoughts on several issues before you. My opinions below are just that, opinions. Could everybody mute themselves, please? Thank you. They are shared in the spirit of a longstanding interest in promoting democracy combined with some years of experience with governance of our city. So number 1, election cycles 2, 3, or 4 years. Commissioner McVoy writes, my recommendation is 3 years. From my own experience, I believe 2 is too short and 4 is too long. Regarding 3-year terms being out of sync with the federal cycle, my solution would be to keep the elections in March. Elections are helpful for keeping elected representatives in touch with the community, so I would definitely not go longer than 3 years. The second topic, term limits. He writes he's definitely in favor of term limits. If the cycle is 3 years, then 2 terms seems like a reasonable limit. It also seems reasonable to permit an incumbent to run for a different kind of seat. For example, commissioner running for mayor, mayor running for commissioner, commissioner running for commissioner at large, and vice versa. I'm less comfortable with the idea of candidates being able to get around term limits by changing their district of residence, something I certainly have seen. The third topic, single vote districts. He wrote, my overall thinking would be that Lake Worth Beach would be optimizing for whatever approach is most likely to provide the most democratic representation of all in the city. Many, including myself, are concerned that under current conditions, a small fraction of city residents chooses the commission, and worse, that small fraction is not spread evenly over the city. It does seem that single vote districts have the potential to help mitigate that problem. The counter argument, though, is that commissioners might become more provincial in their decision-making. There certainly is a risk that commissioners campaigning only within a single vote district would not learn the whole city anywhere near as well as those who must campaign over the whole city. This assumes that the candidate's campaign process involves door-to-door listening to residents. Overall, I have mixed feelings about this issue. I guess my best recommendation is to bring in someone who has experience with cities that have single vote districts and ask them lots of questions. Deerfield Beach has single votes. I know it's not in our county, but I worked there before here, and it's single vote districts, 4-year terms. I'm inclined to agree with the logic that if the city were to adopt single vote districts, it would simultaneously increase the commission size to 7 by adding 2 at-large commissioners. But this too may be a complicated issue when viewed through the lens of striving to democratically increase representation of everyone in the city. Consider this scenario. The mayor and the 2 at-large commissioners might imaginably be elected primarily by the eastern high turnout area. The single vote district commissioners representing districts 3 and 4 might also be elected primarily by the more eastern higher turnout areas. In that case, although single vote districts would likely have increased the representation of residents in districts 1 and 2, they might not have solved the original problem of possible dominance by the eastern portions of the city. With what I know to date, I would probably favor single vote districts combined with 2 additional at-large commissioners. That said, I cannot say with confidence that this would be the best or only solution for improving democracy in our city. I would be eager for additional information. Here's a wild thought. It might be worthwhile to consider redrawing the districts. It would, of course, have to be done professionally with the specific goal of increasing democratic representation of all in the city. If this topic proves to be of interest, the committee would probably consider bringing in outside expertise. And then the last is elections in November or March. He wrote, I am strongly in favor of March. I understand the reasoning that November could increase city election voter turnout because of the federal elections. However, with 3-year terms, which I strongly support, this argument diminishes. My additional, and to me even more relevant, reasoning for March elections is that I strongly believe in the importance of door-to-door conversations between residents and candidates, or to be more specific, in the importance of candidates listening to residents. Here, climate plays a role. November elections means canvassing in August, September, October, the hottest, muggiest months of our year. It is a lot to ask candidates and volunteers to do that. I believe that March elections substantially increase the likelihood of increased resident candidate conversations. That is the end of his comments. And Chair Stevens, City Attorney Tresivia is here and he has his hand raised.
Mr. Tresivia, we would greatly appreciate hearing your thoughts on everything we're discussing.
Okay, Mr. Chair, how are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Good, thank you. So I wanted to echo a little bit of what you said in terms of November elections being expensive, because a different city also was looking at November, and the quote they got was 80,000. So if you're a standalone election, so the price just seems to be going up and up and up if you're standalone. Melissa's point and everybody else's point I'm hearing about whether it's ranked choice or runoffs. One question that I've heard is if you eliminate runoffs, do you have a minimum number of votes? So for example, if you have 5 people in a race, you theoretically could win with 21% of the vote. So if you get to a point of saying no runoffs, is it no runoff if you win the race with a certain minimum, at least 35% of the voters, 40%, whatever it is. So that's just something, food for thought. Other than that, as they say in Mrs. Spock, go forth and prosper, And I know Christy at the last meeting, you said you really didn't need her for the whole meeting. So I'll ask the same question. I'm happy to stay the whole meeting. If you don't think I need to be here, you're a pleasure.
Unless there are any objections from my fellow members, I would bid you adieu for the evening, and we'll save your billable hours for something more important.
I agree with that.
I do have a couple of clarification questions, of which I think he would be an integral source. Sorry.
No, Ms. Claridade, so please go ahead.
Okay, my question is as pertaining, and it may have been covered last week. I was not here at last meeting. I was here. I apologize. But in the meeting minutes, I saw that a couple of my fellow members had been in favor of at-large elections. And so I know how we handle our elections in Lake Worth Beach, and I apologize if this was answered. I'm not satisfied with what our definition of at large is. When I read the Voting Rights Act of 1965, when I read the NAACP, we've got case law where at large has been struck down recently because it was discriminatory. So I'm not exactly understanding. I need clarification on how we are using at large. I need clarification on that issue, because at present mine is not in alignment with what seems to be going forth in this conversation. Thank you.
Well, at this point, it's really the committee's choice whether they want to recommend at large or district voting. As you've already heard a little bit tonight, there's pros and cons to both sides of that argument. The Voting Rights Act, you're correct. In some cases, it's been found to discriminate because at large, if you happen to have a community that's 80% Caucasian, let's say a county, well, then you're never going to elect a minority. And historically, you've never elected a minority. And I know Palm Beach County Commission 20 years ago or so, went to single member districts because they used to be elected at large, and they increased from 5 county commissioners to 7, and essentially created a district that is a minority majority district, which is a district that runs kind of along the railroad tracks. Also, the district in the Glades is kind of mixed from a racial ethnic makeup, but it's traditionally also been a Caucasian person that's occupied that seat. So unless someone really does a study as to whether Lake Worth Beach is discriminated against because of at-large, I couldn't just make that conclusion or assumption, but it's certainly an issue that you'd want to look into and determine whether single member districts, and then how do you draw those districts? It's the kind of the gerrymandering issue that happens in Tallahassee every 10 years. So I know that's not a precise answer other than to say at-large districts are sometimes found to be discriminatory and sometimes found not to be. It just really depends case by case, city or jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Ms. Clairday, recognizing that we're going to discuss that at much length this evening, does that address your needs from the city attorney for the moment?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well then, Mr. Torcivia, we will bid you good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have a good night. Thank you for your service for the city. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will jump in here first because Ms. Clairday, I spoke to the National League of Cities at length and described the demographic profile of our city and the demographic makeup of our commission. And they said more or less the same thing that you were saying, that we seem like the perfect target for a Department of Justice consent decree when it comes to the Voting Rights Act, that there's just no question that what is happening right here is not tenable with the spirit of the Voting Rights Act, or, we'll say the spirit of the Civil Rights Act, or whatever's left of it. So, I think, at least from my discussions with the National League of Cities, I don't see at this point how we do not incorporate some form of single member districts. That said, I have spoken to a lot of people. You heard from our public comments. I spoke to a demographic consultant who does nothing but, I don't want to call it gerrymandering, but he does nothing but draw commission lines for a living. And the National League of Cities is very clear on this. Single member districts do indeed devolve into single district representation. That there's no question that if you go single member, yes, you will solve the civil rights issue, which we have to solve. I at least from my perspective, this shouldn't even be much of a discussion. But how do you do that in such a way that you don't take one problem and change it for another problem? And I think that's, the onus is on this committee to say, can we be constructive? Can we come up with something that is a compromise, something that gets us the best of both possible worlds? And most importantly, I will note, survives this committee, then survives review and a vote by the commission, and then also goes to the voters, right? So, I would like whatever we produce as a committee here to facilitate enthusiasm and consensus throughout the community. I really am not enthusiastic about the idea that we're going to propose things that are just going to turn into a food fight amongst the public. I think that is the last thing we want. So with that, Ms. Robert has had her hand up for a while, and Ms. Robert, it would be great to hear your thoughts.
I appreciate the time. I just wanted to let you all know, just for clarity, I'm not on camera today because I'm very symptomatic with MS, which I have. So my disability is not helping my cognitive right now. So forgive if I'm not coming out in straight sentences, but my mind's very clear. That being said, I just want to have a couple points that I've been listening to. First of all, March elections, since it does sound like March elections are not going to be changing anytime soon, what about putting our energies in August towards speaking to the commission about perhaps speaking to the League of Cities to get a consensus on promoting, advertising, and getting people more involved in March elections? Since everyone is doing it, I think this could be something that could be a broader approach than just a city issue to get everyone on board with promoting March elections, at least for now. When it comes to the ranked choice voting, I understand that that's not a possibility right now, but as you'd even said, Chairman, that there has been some activity with Sarasota, and I believe it's the Florida General Election Ranked Choice Voting Initiative, which is Initiative 2101, which is, I think, going to ballot possibly November 8th. That may be something to look at, to just keep an eye on, and maybe let the commission know that that's something that may be forthcoming, and maybe something that we can, tag onto and maybe help it to gain traction. When it comes to what Commissioner McVoy had said about the case of having I'm sorry, the word's not coming. The at large, the 2 additional commission seats, it's at large, I think. I love the idea of looking at redrawing our different districts, because yes, that we are in peril right now as to having fair elections. Perhaps we could find a way to find outside help when it comes to finding a way to redraw the district lines to help when we have those 2 extra commissioners, to make everything a bit more fair. And perhaps with the at-large commissioners, we could consider, I don't know if this is completely out of the box, but perhaps one of those commissioners, much like, when I went to graduate school, I waited a year to get into a program that was very elite. There are only 24 students a year. Because of action, I, being white, waited a year so that there was someone else that was less able to get into a program like that. I had to wait a year to get in, and I did that gladly. And then I went in. Maybe for this commission seat, we need to say perhaps one of those seats should come from a minority. I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but maybe there's a way to look at that so that we don't have that issue when it comes from an across the board vote. It's just a thought, and I'm sorry. Well, I can't be sorry, but this is how I speak right now. But that's pretty much what I had to say.
Well, Ms. Robert, I thought you were particularly well-spoken on all of those subjects. Does anyone else have, would anyone else like to pick up on that? Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I was not really familiar with the reasoning behind the Voting Rights Act, the League of Cities, so I've done quite a bit of reading on single-member districts versus at-large. I do see the reason behind it. It's very clear to me, but I feel that if we do something like Deborah Roberts spoke of, if we carve out a district for our minority residents and more or less give them a commissioner, if their turnout is already historically low, what's to stop a very small number of people from electing one of the commissioners on our seats?
Well, I actually have an answer to that. I think if we both expanding the number of commissioners and having single member only commissioners provides for more opportunity for more people to build relationships with their commissioners. That's really kind of the short of it, that if your commissioner either really comes from your neighborhood, you're gonna be able to build a relationship, by extension, get motivated to vote for them, right? So I think that gets back to what Commissioner McVoy was saying, that these one-on-one discussions, the relationships with the commissioners are the franchise to kind of the nth degree, if you will, right? Like voting for a commissioner is great. Having a relationship with a commissioner is how you really your franchise. So what I'm gonna come back to this. I think if you have a single member, it provides more people a closer relationship with their commissioners, more likely they're gonna get out the vote for them by extension. And then same thing, if you expand by default, you'll just have more people who wanna show up because they have relationships with those people. Mr. Blackman. Mr. Blackman, you are muted.
Trying to, there I go. Permission to share my screen. I do have the Boynton Beach. It is the June totals, June of 2021 totals of city and city wards. And since they are the only municipality in Palm Beach County, I think it would be instructive just to see how there is other demographic information available that I don't have handy right now from the Supervisor of Elections website. So I encourage anyone to make themselves available of that information by going to the website itself. But let me just share the screen here and see if I can.
Mr. Blackman, you have permission to do so. There you go.
Okay, all right.
We cannot see anything.
That, there is,
Mr. Blackman, it says, oh, we're good now.
Okay. You can see that?
Yes.
They are a much larger city, obviously, with 51,000 registered voters. We're not even close to that. I'm not sure what their total population is. It's also interesting that the Supervisor of Elections, and this might be something to bring up at the August 17th City Commission meeting, they term inactive voters. I've never seen that term, and it identified and called out 4 different municipalities. Just for example, going down here, you can see Lake Worth Beach. Our total voter count is 17,588, of which 981 are considered inactive. So I think that would be instructive to see what the definition of inactive voters is. But you can see that the 4 districts, and they just have 4 commissioners. They do not have the 2 additional at-large seats like we are talking about. The only position that is elected at large is the mayor's seat in Boynton Beach. And it is, you know, there is one district, District 21, that is larger than the others, but they're all within probably single percentage points of each other in terms of size. So what I felt would be an interesting, I'll stop sharing now. What would be an interesting exercise and a starting point is just to see what the population breakdown is of our existing, see where we are in relation just to the raw numbers. And I don't know if it would be useful to have 7 individual single member districts like the county does. I don't think we're large enough or geographically diverse enough. I'm still in favor of my original idea of the 4 representative districts, single voter districts, plus the 2 at large and the mayor. So just.
Well, thank you, Mr. Blackman. That was very helpful. Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, I wanted to ask question because I know like the city clerk has brought up issues when it comes to like how the amount of money that's spent in regards to some of these policy changes. Does the city budget have an issue with expanding the seats on the dais? Going with the 2 at large, would that not affect the budget, or is it they have no issue with that? I'm just curious.
Chair Stevens, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the way we pay for the elections is we pay for the services of the Supervisor of Elections. I do not believe it would affect the cost because, I mean, it could go up if more people come out and vote. Honestly, the greatest cost for the election were the vote by mail ballots. That was the majority of the cost. But we wouldn't be paying substantially. I don't think that there's a different contract for Boynton Beach population in 2019 of almost 77,000, just so you know, Mr. Blackman. So it's probably close to that. So it looks like they have a larger majority of people have registered to vote than in our fair city. I don't believe that needs to be a consideration regarding single men, the cost of the election. I don't believe it would affect it.
Madam Clerk and Mr. Morgan, I want to dovetail on this though, because the email I have from the Supervisor of Elections, She says, in no uncertain terms, our office cannot accommodate November municipal elections at this time, and we strongly encourage municipalities to stick to March elections so they can participate in cost sharing with one another. Just going to reread that. Our office cannot accommodate November municipal elections at this time. I mean, if we want to go against the supervisor of elections and be the one city trying to do this, I mean, God bless us, but I do think there is a practical middle ground, and I would encourage a motion to that end as soon as possible so that we can kind of table this discussion and move on to more material things. Ms. White, and actually, I believe Mr. Morgan had more to say, but Ms. White. Ms. White, you are muted. Still muted. Okay, we'll come back to you. Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, well, no, my question was just how would expanding the amount of commissioners affect the budget, or would the city have an issue with that being, that's not, I'm starting to see and realize that November is probably out of reach for us right now. And yes, I would motion to table discussions on moving the elections from March to November. For now,
Second.
Which was seconded. I guess we can vote on it.
Would anyone like to make a friendly amendment? So that's thank you, Mr. Morgan. Would anyone like to make a friendly amendment saying that we still would ask the commission to reach out to the Palm Beach County League of Cities to support this conversation moving forward at the county level, you know, if there is collective action in this direction?
Second that.
Okay, Ms. White, are you making the motion, or Mr. Gallegos, do you want to make that friendly? Who wants to make that friendly amendment?
I'm not making the motion. I just would like to comment on it. It's really pretty offensive to be told that we cannot do something. You know, I just, that's bothersome. I mean, obviously it's up to the city to decide whether in fact they want to spend that money, whether in fact they want to change it from March to November. And looking at the statistics of percentages of people voting in November during the general election versus March, it's really, it's quite staggering. So I hear what you're saying, Mr. Ramsey, that maybe we need to look forward and see if down the road it's possible. But I don't see anything wrong with this committee saying, or voting at least first to see if the whole committee believed that November was better than March. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't at least approach that to the commission and let them know that this is what this committee believes would be best. You know what I mean?
Of course, I do believe Mr. Gallegos, if he was making that friendly amendment, it does accomplish that, because we can vote on the friendly amendment before we vote on Mr. Morgan's motion to actually table. So we can vote, if Mr. Gallegos, you were indeed making the friendly amendment to ask the commission to keep up this fight, right? I think that's the kind of say, yes, we as a committee are in favor of moving to November, but we recognize that it is on the commission to work with the other municipalities and the league and to, you know, continue the organizing effort that would be required to make that happen. So I do think the friendly amendment accomplishes that. We will still be going to the commission and saying a majority of the committee supports November elections, but we don't have the power to do it on our own. We ask you to reach out to the Palm Beach County League of Cities and keep up the fight. If I have that right, Mr. Gallegos, and forgive me for putting a lot of words out there.
No, I agree with that.
Okay, Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I'd like to address the number of commissioners as the at-large as opposed to the 4 district commissioners. We have a huge population in the city, I believe, that can't vote, but they need representation within their districts as well, which means that dividing by population, I think, would serve us well, making sure that we were equitably divided despite the number of people who can vote. I want to hark back to Commissioner McVoy's comments, because I do think that extra commissioners at large skews whatever we do in terms of voting. I'd like to address the issue of parochialism in a district. By being a person from a particular district does not mean that you do not care about the entire city, and it does not divorce you from the entire city. It means that you more closely represent the individuals within your district. They know who you are, they can come to you. This has been stated before. So and again, dividing districts into 7 districts or whatever it would take to do this would make a small population or a small populated city even smaller district by district. And that probably isn't necessary. It also increases the wages that need to be spent to pay commissioners, extra commissioners, probably the same amount that a recount would cost. That's so expensive. So, I think these are issues that need to be considered.
Well, Ms. Brown, I think those are all very good points, and I think we're going to get to them hopefully in substance here in a moment. But I will remind everyone that we have a friendly amendment without a second on the floor, and we have a motion underlying that friendly amendment. So, Ms. Claraday, you've had your question, your hand up.
Yes, please. Okay, you said previously that a majority of this committee is in favor of November elections.
We do not yet know that. There's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a friendly amendment that would determine that and would provide action to that direction, but it needs a second. Mr. Goodstein? Mr. Goodstein, you are muted.
I don't think it needs a second. It just needs to be accepted by the person who made the original motion.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Morgan, do you accept this friendly amendment?
Absolutely. And, I just wanted to ask if it's known that the majority of the board does support asking for the commission to look into November elections towards the future. I know I've heard a lot of people in support of that idea, but I wasn't sure that we had that majority.
Well, we are about to find out as soon as I call the question, because you have accepted the friendly amendment. Mr. Blackman, would you like to speak first before I call the question on the friendly amendment?
Yeah, this is discussion on the motion. I think I've been fairly explicit about my feeling regarding the November elections, that it is a failed experiment. We tried it, and for a number of reasons, it did not work. The November campaigns, there's a lot of noise. It's hard to get volunteers that are willing to work for a municipal campaign when they're already involved and politically active anyway, and they are absorbed by a national election. There's a lot of noise, a lot of distraction. I don't think we have necessarily a better decision rendered with the November election because people may not be focused on municipal issues as much, and we may get more votes, but are they more meaningful? So for a whole host of reasons, I just, and plus the supervisor of elections, rather definitive answer, I would say that we not pursue this at all. So I'll be voting.
Duly noted. Ms. Robert?
I feel the same here as Wes in a lot of ways, but I will stand on the fact that perhaps in August we can speak with the commission about looking into speaking with the League of Cities and boosting up March, because so many others vote at that same time, and make an initiative to get people out there to vote for that date.
Very good point. Mr. Goodstein?
I agree with Wes. I'm going to have to vote against this because it includes the the amendment to suggest that we explore going to November, because that is a bad idea.
Well, okay, Mr. Goodstein, I was actually proposing that we vote on the amendment separately. So we'll vote on them we'll vote on the amendment and then we'll vote on the underlying motion. Do you have a problem with that?
No.
Okay, all right. And then Mr. Monroe, and then I'm going to call the question unless you have your hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been speaking with many residents discussing what we've gone over in the last meeting. And I totally agree with Deborah, whose last name I don't know, I can't see, that we should look further into how was it put that other cities are looking at. Totally with West Blackman, totally with Chris Mavoy, I would vote absolutely not. Doesn't make sense. Just, you know what, from the very basic point of the campaigning issue that Chris brought up, you got people who are going to be campaigning in utterly miserable climate. You know, we do have to respect our environment and our bodies and our people who live here. So it would be a no for me.
Okay, all right. So with that, I am calling a question on the friendly amendment, which is specifically that we are going to tell the commission that we are in favor of the November elections if they can make it work with the supervisor of elections. And in order to do so, they go through the organizing activity that would be required with the Palm Beach County League of Cities and the other municipalities in the county. So all those in favor of that direction of the commission, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Aye.
Mr. Do you have that?
I do not. I have no idea what the vote was.
Okay, so
Maybe we should raise our
anyway,
hand.
I am an aye in favor of that.
Barbara White is an aye in favor of that.
Mr. Morgan,
Aye.
anyone else? Mr. Gallegos?
That's an aye for me.
Okay, all right. Anyone else?
May I ask that you repeat the motion?
Yes, this motion is just to tell the commission that our committee is in favor of going to November if it becomes feasible with the supervisor of elections. And in order to do so, that the Palm Beach County League of Cities and our fellow municipalities are engaged in an organizing activity to get us there. So we're essentially saying, hey, we would like you to tell the league that we want to do this. And by extension, tell the supervisor of elections we want to do this. Okay, all right. So without any other, all those against, say nay.
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 Okay. Mr.
Jerry
Wilson?
Claire Day, nay.
I am a nay, but I don't know how many nays there are.
Okay, please, if you're visible, raise your hands if you're nay.
May I suggest a roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay. We'll take a roll for the nays.
Jerry Claire Day, nay.
Yeah. Mr. Goodstein?
Nay.
Ms. White?
I'm in favor of the.
Right, you're an aye. Mr. Wilson?
I'm a nay.
Mr. Morgan?
Aye.
Mr. Monroe?
Nay.
Ms. Claire Day?
Nay.
Ms. Brown?
Nay.
Mr. Blackman?
Nay.
Ms. Robert?
Nay.
Mr. Gallegos?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, can you share the vote, share the tally?
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I'm counting correctly, 8 nays and 4 ayes.
Okay, all right, so the motion, the friendly amendment fails. All right, this is for the underlying motion, which is to table discussion of the November election, or moving the elections to November. I'll do a roll call vote again. Mr. Goodstein?
Could you say, what What are we voting on?
We are tabling further discussion of November at this point.
That's what we're voting on, whether we should permanently? Okay.
In light of the just failed amendment and the direction from the supervisor of elections, this is to table this discussion for the purposes of this committee at this time. So,
Please mute your mic if you're not speaking. I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Mr. Goodstein,
Hey, on the motion to table, yes.
Ms. White,
Nay.
Mr. Wilson,
Nay. Wait, no, aye. I'm sorry, aye. I'm confused here.
Mr.
Aye.
Morgan. Mr. Morgan,
Aye.
Mr. Monroe,
You have totally lost me now. What are we voting on? What we've already voted on another time?
we are tabling discussion of November. No more discussion of moving to November.
Aye.
Ms. Claire,
Aye.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Blackman,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Aye.
Mr. Gallegos,
Aye.
and myself, I am an aye. Mr. Wilson, you have the tally?
I have one nay.
Okay, all right. So, motion passes. No more discussion of November for the purposes of this committee. All right, Mr. Wilson, yes.
I will be signing off now and turning over the minutes to our city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. May I suggest that in light of the clear consensus that we had at our last meeting, that the next item that we discuss, ideally with a motion, is for term limits. I will note that there was overwhelming consensus. We were unanimous at the end of our discussion to having term limits, limiting folks to two terms in one given seat. No other limitations, just that you could not run for a third consecutive term in a seat. Welcoming all motions and discussion, but we were in clear agreement on that item.
All right, I make a motion that we limit, so that we have term limits of 2 terms in any one particular seat consecutively.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, that motion was made by Mr. Goodstein and seconded by Ms. Robert. Does anyone have any comments that they'd like to make about the motion? Yes, Ms. White.
I would ask to consider that it not be consecutively, that it would just be only 2 limits, 2 term limits total.
Second that.
Okay, so we have we'll treat that as a friendly amendment. We have a friendly amendment that says you only get 2 shots at you only get two terms no matter what within a given seat though, still, correct?
I do not accept the amendment.
Now, we're just talking about the city commission seats, correct?
Correct, as you just proposed it, but Mr. Goodstein did not accept it. So I believe we have to call a vote on the underlying motion at this point, but let me open it up for a little more discussion before I do that. But yes, at the moment, what we're contemplating is two. Mr. Goodstein, forgive me, but we're just trying to facilitate, make sure everyone is heard here, right?
Discuss at will.
Yeah, okay. But yes, what the motion right now is 2 consecutive terms per seat. That's the only limitation. You can go run for another seat. You can come back and run for a 3rd term after you've taken time off. It just ensures that no one is there for, at the current time, which would be 9 years, let alone 12, let alone longer in 1 seat. Okay, seeing no comments.
Maybe I should articulate why I think this is good.
Please.
I have heard many complicated schemes about how to do this. But the simplest way to do it is to say 2 terms in any seat, Then you can change districts if you want, or which would be difficult. You would end up having to take a term off because otherwise you wouldn't be qualified. Or you could run for the mayor because that's at large, and that's been one of the things that people kind of suggested. But this way of doing it incorporates, I think, the essence of those. And I'd be interested in hearing whether people like this or not before we vote.
Mr. Morgan.
It seems to me that the gentleman would like for us to vote on that motion first, and if it doesn't pass, right, then maybe we would go with the what you're saying is a friendly amendment, because it seems like, right, like
In that instance, it wouldn't be a friendly amendment, but yeah, someone could make a subsequent motion to amend. But yes, we would first vote on, are we at a minimum having term limits for 2 consecutive terms within a given seat, at a minimum. That is the motion on the table by Mr. Goodstein and seconded by Ms. Robert. Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I think to say that you can, after your 2 terms, move on to another seat defeats the purpose of a 2-term limit or any term limit. When people become entrenched in a city and feel that they can move from one place to another just to hold on to that particular power, I think it's destructive to the city as a whole. I know people gain knowledge, they gain competency as they grow in the seat, but there are other ways to show it. And it does not have to be holding on to power within a city. When you have so many, you have a plethora of folks who could step up and take these jobs as well. And the diversity of people that we can find in this way would enhance the city. You'd get hopefully younger folks than me coming in with newer ideas and a variety of experiences that could make a great difference to the city.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Ms. Robert?
I'm not opposed to someone after taking a break of a term to look for another seat, but I would say perhaps not at the same seat again. I know that would mean moving, relocating. It's a little weird to think that someone would wait 3 years and then move to another place to run again. But I think by that time, there'll be other people that will be running for that seat as well. And I don't want to deter someone to run for a 3rd term if they're that passionate. But again, I wouldn't want to see that be reciprocal over and over and over. So do you limit it after that? You can only run 2 terms and 2 terms again. So yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum, but I'd like to discuss that thought.
Okay, Mr. Monroe.
Yeah, just to throw a little wrench in there, and I agree with Ms. Roberts, absolutely. One of the people I was consulting with pointed out that, we're looking at this allowable terms, and we're presupposing that good politicking should not be continued. And this particular person's opinion was that, politics is a profession. So, there are people who are in it, and would you ask someone to give up their profession? That said, I would certainly, in my personal opinion, be in agreement with the 2 terms. And as Ms. Roberts was saying, the opportunity to run again. Anybody who's that dedicated and is willing to move, hey, why not?
Very good points. Anyone else? Mr. Goodstein?
I don't think we've ever seen a case of someone moving from one district to another, but I have to tell you, if I was running the campaign of that person, I would say you're going to have a hard time because you've just shown how desperate you are to hold power. And it's going to be quite easy to campaign against you. I'm also not sure, and maybe the clerk can speak to this, about the qualifying requirements. Now, you're required to live in the district in the commissioner, but you don't lose your seat if you move. So theoretically, someone could move out of their district, or maybe I'm wrong about that. But theoretically, a person could, Melissa, you want to speak to that?
Sure. I'm going to need to do some reading about that. Now, I know 100% if you move out of the city, you lose your seat. I don't know that that's addressed anywhere, and that's a really good point. That if you move, if you're running for a certain, no, I believe you have to live within the district for your term. Let me get back to you on that, but I'm pretty sure you have to stay within that district. I'm not 100% sure. So, but regarding your comment, Mr. Goodstein, I have seen people run for different districts at different elections. I'm just saying. It
Okay.
has happened.
I was thinking of the particular case of a seated commissioner then moving.
Yeah, this is somebody who's never won and has run for 3 different seats.
Yeah, no, that has happened. I know. I'm just a seated commissioner, to my knowledge, has never moved to another district and run, to my knowledge. But
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I can get back to you on
Okay.
that, but I believe you qualify for a district. And although you're not elected by the district, I'm not sure it's addressed, actually. But let me check on that and I will get back to you.
and actually, if it's not addressed, maybe that's one of those little tweaks that we need to suggest to the commission. But that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Ms. Robert, and then Mr. Blackman.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw something else in there with this in mind. I think when I'm thinking about people running for a second seat with a break, I'm thinking about the single district voting in mind. That's a totally different thing because then you have other people voting for that individual. And I know there's concern about nepotism and wanting power, but there's also a matter of having a willingness to serve and being effective in your serving. So that if you move into a different district, you have a different compilation of people that will be voting for you if we do, in fact, go ahead with single district voting. So maybe that would be another thought thrown into the mix.
Mr. Blackman?
Yeah, I would agree with Ms. Roberts on that. I think our decision here should be, if we're headed towards the single district, single representation districts, we have to keep that in mind when we answer this question. But I think that it would be an extraordinary thing for someone to run 2 terms in one district if they were just elected by their district and decide to move to another district to be elected by a different group of people. I see the natural progression being running for mayor, which this would not prohibit that.
And hopefully would encourage, right? I mean, the League of Cities is very clear that, ideal mayoral candidates come from the commission, right? That is their preference as the best practice. So I think this gets us to where that becomes much more likely someday in the future. Mr. Goodstein.
This goes back to where everything is interlinked. Should we table this and consider the single member recommendation first?
Mr. Goodstein, it's your motion. You have the right to withdraw it. I will note, though, that we were unanimous in support of at least the bare minimum form of term limits at our prior discussion. So you're welcome to withdraw it, but
I'm going to say we should go ahead and vote on this and revisit it. If it fails, revisit the issue after we've decided the single member.
okay, I think that's a very fair point. We can revisit it after we've addressed single member anyway, right?
Exactly.
We can come back around. Okay. All right. So seeing no other hands, I am going to call the question. I will do Ms. White, are you raising your hand?
No, I was just going to unmute.
Oh, okay. All right. So I am going to call the question. Madam Clerk, I'm going to do a roll call again. So are you ready? Okay. All right. Mr. Goodstein?
Read the question again, please.
Oh, this is to all those in favor of, Mr. Goodstein, you articulated.
limit, I don't know, can the clerk read it back?
Yes, I can read it if you'd like. So motion made by Mr. Goodstein and seconded by Ms. Robert for term limits of 2 consecutive terms for a given seat.
Okay.
I'll vote yes.
Resuming the roll call, Ms. White?
Nay, but I am in favor of term limits, just not this particular motion.
Duly noted. Mr. Monroe? Mr. Monroe, you are muted.
I'm going to say nay, but I agree. I agree with term limits, just not this particular motion.
Okay. Ms. Clairday?
Yay.
Ms. Brown?
Nay, but not this motion. I'm for term limits.
Mr. Blackman?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Nay.
Mr. Gallegos?
Aye.
Ms. Robert?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Madam Clerk, can you share the vote?
You're muted.
Madam Clerk, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So what I have, and please correct me if I'm wrong, ayes are Chair Stevens, members Wes Blackman, Jerry Clairday, Anthony Gallegos, Sam Goodstein, and Deborah Robert. Nay is Vice Chair Barbara White, members Joyce Brown, Daniel Morgan, and Philip Ross Monroe. Absent are Zaid Shamsi Basha and Dave Wilson. So
Okay.
that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ayes, 4 nays, 2 absent. So motion passes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. All right. So this committee is officially in favor of term limits in their what we'll call most liberal form, limited to two terms in a consecutive seat. If anyone would like to now make a subsequent motion, they're welcome to do so.
Well, it would defeat, well, let me just ask. So if I were to make a motion that 2 term limits and take out the consecutive for city commissioners, which it would not, what we had talked about the last meeting, they could certainly run for mayor after doing 2 term limits as commissioner. But I don't know if we can do that motion now that
Well,
we
Barbara,
voted.
the motion we voted on does not restrict anybody from voting for mayor after their seat, right?
Correct.
No.
Running for mayor, I believe you meant.
Right.
Yeah,
They
right.
can't run a 3rd time for the same seat, but they could run for mayor,
Or the mayor could run for a commission seat.
a different district.
What we just passed, though, would allow someone to run for a third term in quotations in a given seat, but they'd have to take what would be the 3rd consecutive term off, right? Or they'd have to lose. You have to take a break. So, Ms. White, if you would like to make a motion amending kind of this baseline of term limits, I as chair would of course encourage you to do so, or someone else. I know Ms. Robert has her hand up.
I do, because I'm thinking yes for running again, but I'm not convinced that it should be for the same district ever. Or I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind discussing if there was a 3-year break, could that person run again for the same seat, or they would have to be compelled to be in a different district, which is kind of what I'm leaning toward. Anybody have thoughts on that?
Well, that goes again to the single district. If we go to the single district, it certainly, like you had said earlier, it would be a different group of people voting for that seat. So that makes a little more sense. But as far as a motion, I would move to term limit to 2 terms for any commissioner seat. So that wouldn't preclude a person from running for mayor.
I could see that, and then we'll get to the single district when we get to it.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, was that you seconding Ms. White's motion?
Yes, I second
Okay.
that motion.
So we have a motion by Ms. White and seconded by Mr. Morgan. I'll do a roll call vote again.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Repeat the motion.
Can you please repeat what the motion is? I'm not clear about that.
Okay. Term limit city commission seats to 2 terms. I mean, we can just leave it at that. I mean, that would not prevent the person then for running for mayor.
So once,
I'm sorry, but my understanding is that the motion that passed does not prevent someone from running for mayor. They just can't run. So I respectfully don't understand your motion.
May I try and clarify?
Sure.
I think, Barbara, is what you're trying to say is that under the motion we passed, we said 2 consecutive terms in a particular seat, then they could, but you don't want them after the break to be able to run again for that seat.
Well, I don't want them to be able to run for any commission seat. I'm talking about 2 terms for any commission seat.
So it's a further restriction on the amendment passed to make it so that all time a person could only could have 2 terms as a commissioner, period.
Period.
So it's a greater restriction on the past motion.
Correct.
Okay, they could run for mayor, but 2 commission terms ever in any seat.
Correct.
May I suggest you then say, add in there for districts 1 through 4 commission seats? Because even though the mayor's the mayor, technically she is a commissioner on the commission.
Okay, so it would be 1 through 4. And Barbara, did you want to restrict the mayoral to 2 terms also?
Yes.
So 2 terms ever, would a person be able to run for the commission seat and then run for mayor?
Yes.
So potentially in a perfect world, they could sit on the city commission as a commissioner for 2 years and a mayor for 2 years and then 4 and then done, right?
Term.
Okay.
Not years.
So
Oh,
4
it'd be
terms
12.
total. No, 4 terms total with 2 in it, 2 as a commissioner, 1 through 4, and 2 as mayor. And that's all.
Correct.
So a person would have I would have in my back pocket 4 bills that said seats on the commission. 2 of them would say mayor, and 2 of them would say any commission, any district 1 through 4. And once I had spent those 4 bills during my entire lifetime, that would be all I could serve.
Correct.
Mr. Blackman?
I'd like to offer, just so that we don't preclude an option that I'm in favor of, that we say any at-large seat, which would include the mayor. But it would leave the option open that we could look at the additional 2 at-large seats.
So are you saying, Mr. Blackman, that those at-large seats, they wouldn't be limited to 2 terms?
No, it would be the same as if it was a mayor.
It'd be a third
So,
option then. You could do 2 years to use commissioner, or 2 terms as commissioner, 2 terms as mayor, 2 terms at large, if you were so lucky to serve that much.
But the point being is you can only serve 2 terms in 1 seat ever.
That
Yes.
would
But
be
not
the clearest way
including,
to
but not
make the
including the
motion.
mayor's seat.
That's not clear because a while ago we were just saying, Sam clarified, you can only have a city commission seat on District 4, that's it. So now we're saying that we can have District 1, 2 seats, District 2, 2 seats, District 3, 2 seats, District 4, 2 seats, and then mayor 2 seats.
We are saying that, at least to me, the most elegant next step in the enforcement of term limits would be that you would say, first you say only 2 consecutive, any given seat. And now you say only 2 any given seat.
I like that. I was just going to bring it up once Wes brought up the at-large positions, because perhaps that would solve, even if we went to single district or we didn't, if we went to at-large, then you would have 1 district, you get 2 terms. You take a break, you can go for at-large, or you can go for mayor. That sounds reasonable.
Ms. Robert, I think that brings up a really good point. So actually, Ms. White, if you're open to it, I might suggest that you withdraw your motion at this time, and we will move into the single member / expanded commission discussion, and then we can come back to term limits and see if we need to add a little flavor to them in light of how those discussions go.
That's fine. I'll
Okay.
withdraw it.
I like that.
All right. Well, that was very much your Robert, so thank you.
Second has to be withdrawn as well.
Oh, yes.
Second.
Well,
I-
Mr. Morgan was the seconder. He would have to withdraw the motion.
I'm sorry?
I will withdraw the second. I withdraw the second. The motion, the second.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Thank you, Ms. White. Thank you, Ms. Robert, for making an exceptional point there. All right, so then let's jump into it. I'm of the opinion that the single member discussion, single member district discussion, and the expanded commission discussion really need to go together. So I guess what I would say is, if someone is very passionate about us just having single member, I encourage them to make that motion. If someone is very, very passionate about us not having any single member, I encourage them to make that motion. And if there is someone who's passionate, other than myself, about doing the hybrid, I encourage them to make that motion as well. So the floor is open. Ms. Robert?
I'm feeling that I love the single district vote, but the caveat is, again, do we take a look at having someone from the outside take a look at redrawing the district lines to make things a bit more fair and conducive to a more blended vote? I don't know. I'm kind of feeling that, again, a little bit of cart before the horse and how we're approaching it, but I'm totally open to figuring it out.
Ms. Clairday?
Yes, okay. Just so that for continuity, I want a definition of single district, so we are all on the same page.
Okay, single member district is that you are only, the commissioner from that district is only elected by the residents of that district. So if you're in District 1, only people who live in District 1 can vote for you, and so on and so forth. At the moment, if we went to single member only districts, it would assume that District 1 is elected by District 1 and so forth, except the mayor. The mayor would become the one at-large member. So at-large just means that you are elected by everyone in the city as we have right now.
Thank you.
And I'll address Ms. Roberts' comment about the proportionment, because I did speak to a demographic consultant. And I also spoke to the National League of Cities about this at length. I actually think that we should, my preference, have this discussion first, because what this is really about is, do you want to preserve some form of at-large representation if you're going to single member? How the lines are drawn is a subsequent discussion, and you can do the mix of at-large and single member or single member only and do reproportionment, right? So the point being is, we can solve this and then next have the discussion. All right, do we want to move to setting up what's called a boundary advisory committee or bringing in an outside consultant? That can be the next discussion, but this can layer on top of that.
Thank you. I feel better.
Ms. Claire
I'm fanning. I'm sorry. I'm having a personal summer. I wasn't raising my hand.
Oh, okay. No worries. All right. Would Mr. Blackman?
Yeah, I just, we're like 2 or 3 meetings into this committee and we're already making a recommendation before a city commission meeting and we haven't gone out to the public. And I just think it might be jumping the gun a little bit. I think we need to look at alternatives. I think it's interesting that Palm Beach County, we only have one city that has single member districts, and that's Boynton Beach, and they have no at-large positions. And we also have the unincorporated county having 7 commissioners in single member districts, but those are the only 2 examples we have in Palm Beach County. I think we have to look a little more broadly before we kind of stake out our turf, literally, on single member districts here. I think the proportionality thing, I think the chair was getting at that. That's more a mechanical thing that will follow, and it would need to be proportional. I think it would be a good exercise to see what our existing district lines are in terms of percentage of population, if they're roughly equal, or if there is a big disparity now, it'd be nice to know about that. So I would just hesitate for us to leap into this discussion now and kind of stake our claim on it and then go before the commission and get a newspaper article saying that the charter committee is recommending single member districts and adding at-large members, and then we have to kind of like fend for ourselves, trying to create reasons for it and examples and that kind of thing. So I would just be cautious in doing that at this time. I was comfortable with the decision of just kind of leaving open the question of term limits to apply to any at-large position. And then we leave this decision later in the decision tree. But that's just my feeling at this point in time.
Ms. White?
I would just point out the model city charter that was provided us. And I just would like to read something just to throw in as a thought. It says there's strong support for the all at large council alternative in smaller municipalities. I gotta change my glasses. And in those cities where assuring fair representation of minority populations is not an issue. In cities where minority representation is enhanced by election from districts, consideration of the alternatives for mixed systems with some council members elected at large and some by districts is recommended. So, I mean, they've done some studies, obviously, and they've looked at it, and Lake Worth has a problem with minority representation on their council. So I think we should consider what's been studied. I mean, that's something to think about. Right now, the way we have it, it doesn't seem to be working.
Mr. Goodstein and then Mr. Blackman again.
Yeah, I think there are 2 numbers I'd like to see for each district, or at least the best guesses we have at them. And one is the population, and 2 is the turnout per district. We've seen the overall turnout and talked about November, March, but I haven't seen numbers on the turnout by district. And those 2 numbers will inform us very much.
Mr. Blackman?
Yes, I agree with Ms. White that I think we do need single member district representation. A hybrid is a good idea. I'm just thinking more globally and strategically for our committee going forward. We do have a longer time frame than just this August City Commission meeting. And I think to stake our claim on this, that is such a foundational issue at this point in time, is a little premature. And I would like to have more information. I'm in favor of it. I think it's a great idea. I just think it might be stubbing our toes or tripping over ourselves if we if we come out with it right now and have it be a formal declaration. I'm okay with the term limit idea, just applying to at-large districts and leaving the question open, whether that be a mayor seat or an at-large seat, just to keep our options open. But that's I hope that clarifies where I am.
Well, Mr. Blackman, you know, I'm very in favor of us not rushing and doing due diligence on these more complex issues, particularly something of this import. It is 6:40. We do, you know, need to discuss when we're meeting next, and our meeting does terminate without a motion at 7 o'clock. So, I mean, unless someone wants to intentionally make a motion at this time to extend this meeting to 8 o'clock to specifically tackle single member versus at large versus a hybrid commission, I think you make a good point. We can hit pause, collect more information as it relates to the population of the current districts, and then come back with that information and jump right into this at our next. But unless someone's really passionate about solving single member and at large or hybrid right now, you know, that actually is my preference at this point. Madam Clerk?
Yes, I am trying to find out what the population is of the different districts. It's my understanding we won't know that till the end of September after we get the census results.
I would like to make a comment since the census was brought up, if I may.
Please, Mr. Morgan.
You know, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is whether or not we believe, although people have said that other people have said that Lake Worth has an issue with representation. I would ask that the other people on the board ask themselves whether or not they believe Lake Worth has an issue with being able to represent the entire population. When I was working at the Guatemala Maya Center in Lake Worth on G Street, I worked closely with a lot of people who were working on the census because Lake Worth had one of the lowest turnouts in the entire nation, right? We heard earlier from the city clerk that the city doesn't even get up to 50% voter participation. So these statistics, you know, we don't, you know, we've been waiting for the census numbers to come out. They've been taking longer than usual, but take a look at the last census numbers. The city underperformed and it has low voter turnout. We know it's is a city with a bunch of migrants and other minorities. To the members who believe that the city shouldn't go into single member voting, believe that the city does not have an issue with representation.
Mr. Morgan, I think that's an exceptional point. I mean, Mr. Blackman, you know, you made note of us of Boynton Beach being the only single member commission in the county. I'll make note that I think we're the only commission in the county at this point where the demographics of our commission and the demographics of our city are so grossly mismatched, right? From the discussions I've had with the professionals, I do not see how in the world we do not go to some form of single member districts. But I'm happy. It is 6:45. I mean, we do need direction from the board here.
I motion that we table and adjourn so that we can take more time to think about single district or at large and have that be the priority at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Goodstein?
I will try and get the numbers on best population estimates currently, which we won't get the census numbers right now, but we will get the surveys they do in the middle years. And Wes, can you try and get the voter turnout by district?
I have that, Sam.
By district?
Oh, no, I have it by precinct, but we can fit the precincts into the districts.
Yeah, you gotta fit the precincts into the districts, but I'm talking about for different years.
I actually do have, I can look back at what we get from the Supervisor of Elections office, and it would have the vote by, you know, who turned out per district, I believe, yes.
It would
I
have it
think
by
I do
precinct.
have that.
It would have it by precinct, but you have to add them. Oh, they
No,
would
no,
have
no,
it by
no.
district.
I believe I do have it by district.
And would you have registered voters by district? Of course.
Maybe.
Okay.
Okay, so bring back as much due diligence as everyone can, please. Mr. Blackman?
Yeah, I would just ask the clerk to maybe apply it to a map too, because it might be interesting to see if a precinct actually goes over a line, or if it even respects our district boundaries, and see if that happens.
And again, we have huge populations that can't vote, which means that the voting rolls, you know, don't reflect that at all. So we have to take those numbers into consideration.
Yes.
Okay.
We have a motion, but we don't have a second that I'm aware of.
Well, I'm gonna, unless, yeah, okay, thank you, Ms. Claire Day. The motion is to adjourn, unless we have an objection. No, sorry, Madam Clerk, what is the?
We can't adjourn until let's set the meetings for August, please.
Right, that's what I was getting at. So
Oh, okay.
I'm not hearing any objection to wrapping up this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for pointing us clearly in that direction. We now need to discuss when we would like to meet in August. So, Madam Clerk, could you actually suggest some days that conform with the current city calendar?
Yes, so as I was corresponding with Chair Stevens and letting him know that the second Monday, third Wednesday was not sustainable. In September, the second Monday and third Wednesday are the same week. If the intent is to meet every other week, which I would suggest, I would just go by picking actual dates, not by second, third, fourth, whatever. So if we want to meet the 2 weeks from now, that would be the week of the 9th. And I don't see, there are no, I don't have like the PB&Z, HRPB. I don't have that in my calendar. I only have city commission, but thus far, there are no commission meetings the week of August 9th. So we met on a Wednesday. If people are available August 9th, if we want to keep it to Monday and Wednesday, August 9th would be a Monday, and then we could go to August 25th, which is a Wednesday. And instead of doing second, third, we could do every other, pretty much every 2 weeks. It'll be a Monday and then a Wednesday if everyone's in agreement with that.
So August 9th and the 25th?
That works.
And bear in mind, as much as you all want to be there, only a quorum is required. So you have 12 members, and it might be difficult at every meeting to have all 12. You just need 7 people to be present via Zoom or in person.
Okay, does anyone object to these dates?
No, I am asking though, you did, Melissa, you did mention Zoom. Will we have that ability or choice going forward for at least August?
Yes, in fact, starting next week with, is next week August? I'm like out of it because I've been working from home.
Yes.
It is.
So, starting with August 2nd, we have the commission has a work session. We are going back to limiting the number of attendees at meetings and requiring masks and social distancing. So yes, I believe we can continue Zooming. The only issue was that you can't, it's very difficult to Zoom from a conference room. So it was requested that we have the meeting, but I don't know, Chair Stevens, now that you were the only physical attendee if you want to Zoom in, in August, and we could see how infections go, et cetera, for September.
No, of course. I recommend that we default to Zoom only at this point. And I strongly encourage everyone to get vaccinated and get all their family and friends vaccinated. And wear your masks.
So if August 9th and 25th are agreeable to everyone, I will make sure that I set up Zoom meetings for those days, and it will just be 100% via Zoom, at least for August. And then we can reassess at the end of August.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Hearing no objections to those dates, I look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn, and I thank you, Ms. Coyne, for all of your hard work and your cat herding.
I second.
You're welcome, and my pleasure.
All those in favor?
And I am the new city clerk, just so you know. I am.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
That is a win for Lake Worth Beach.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.